Hey friends, coming in for another Wellness Wednesday video. I did my SIBO breath test this morning, and like I mentioned before, I did it with my Air 2 device. So this is the first time that I've only done the breath test with my Air 2 device. I have Bubs over here causing trouble, and I have, say hi Levi. He's down there playing. So I got my boys out here with me. So I started out with a SIBO test from the lab. A little while after that, I got the Air 2 device. And so when I did my second SIBO test from the lab, I also did the Air 2 at the exact same times and the same intervals so that I could get a good comparison. And then this test is the first one that I did just with the Air 2 device. My doctor was able to prescribe me some lactulose, so I have it on hand so I can do a SIBO breath test whenever I feel the need to. So I did my 2 weeks without any of the Reuteri yogurt because that can cause a false positive SIBO breath test. And so I had to stay off of that for 2 weeks, which was very difficult. But I did that, and I did my breath test this morning. And I'm just going to share with you the results. It's nothing super exciting, although I am happy that progress has been made. Every time I have taken another SIBO breath test, I have made progress. So here is my little graph of all the different tests I've done. The top blue one is my very first lab test. So you can see there has definitely been progress made from that point. So every time I take a test, like I said, it's gotten lower. Not as much as I'd like, not as clear of results as I'd like, but I have to admit, like, it is improving slowly but surely. The pink line is the second lab test that I did. And I did a whole video on the comparison between the lab test and the Air 2 device that I did at the same time, and the reasons for why there's the discrepancy between them. The Air 2 doesn't go as high as the lab goes, so it's just a little bit different. So comparing the test I took this morning to something, I'm just comparing it to the other Air 2 test because that's like comparing apples to apples. So the test I took this morning is this purple line down here, and I only went to 2 hours. I didn't do the full 3 hours. I just didn't feel like doing it. It takes a long time, and I just wasn't super concerned about the large intestine stuff so much. So you can see, so comparing the purple line to the green line, that's what we're comparing here, is my Air 2 tests that I've done. This one was done, I can't remember, probably 2 or 3 months ago, actually. And you can see that it started out, like when I first started out, I was like, oh my gosh, I could maybe test a negative for SIBO. I was like, after the first 4 tests, and then it jumped up right at the 90-minute mark. And it's still lower than it was on the other test at the 90-minute mark, but it did jump up. And so I did definitely test positive for SIBO. Although, like I have talked about in other videos, the SIBO breath test is not foolproof because different people can have different transit times in their gut, and you're timing what's happening when the food hits your small intestine. So for different people, it could hit it could get through your small intestine faster or slower. And so that jump at the 90-minute mark, it's possible that my transit time was fast enough that that's when it hit my large intestine. That's a possibility. Apparently in the UK, if I'm remembering this correctly, in the UK, their cutoff for diagnosing SIBO with the lactulose breath test is 60 minutes. So in the UK, I would actually test negative for SIBO with this because at the 60-minute mark, I did not go more than 20 parts per million above baseline. So I kind of take that with a grain of salt. Like, it's hard to know for sure if this is a positive SIBO breath test or not. Also, it's worth it to throw in here the difference I felt when taking the lactulose this time versus when I first took it. Very big difference, like my symptoms. And that is a big sign to me that my body is handling things better. And I've already talked about this with inulin. I used to be very, very sensitive to inulin and would give me terrible digestive upset, even small amounts. And now I can eat it in moderate amounts and be totally fine. So I do think that I'm actually making progress in getting my body to a healthier place that is able to handle more variety of food. And that is my goal. If I wanted to just take care of symptoms, I could go carnivore for the rest of my life. And I could take care of my symptoms that way. And basically that's what I've been doing with my diet. I've cut it down to where the foods that I eat manage my symptoms. But my quest right now is to see if there are things I can do with my body in order to get it to a place where it doesn't have as many symptoms and I can expand my variety of food. So I think I am making progress towards that. As always, it's not as cut and dry as we'd like it to be, but I just have to be encouraged by the small changes that I'm seeing, and especially the symptom change, because, you know, stuff on paper is great and that's very helpful for a lot of things. But if you feel no difference in your body, I mean, what's the point, right? So because I am seeing the small changes in the numbers as well as the moderate changes in my symptoms, I am super encouraged, and I'm still very happy that I have chosen this route of addressing my SIBO. Going forward, that's the question. It's not a super crystal clear negative breath test at this point. And I haven't even talked about the methane. Basically, what has happened with my methane is it hasn't changed. Every single test I've gotten, I've tested positive just barely for methane. And it's a really tricky thing to, separate the methane from the hydrogen, because hydrogen converts into methane, so they play into each other. It's kind of tricky like that. But basically, I've just stayed the same the whole time that I have, every test that I do. The methane peaks at around 12, and anything above a 10 is positive for methane. I don't have the typical symptoms that go along with a methanogen overgrowth. That's typically like constipation. I don't have that at all. So I'm not super worried about it. And I'm planning on incorporating the Reuteri yogurt into my lifestyle again. I only was off of it so that I could do this test. And now that I've finished that, actually for my breakfast this morning, I had some of my Super Gut SIBO yogurt, which was delicious. I was so excited to have that this morning. And one thing that the Reuteri probiotic is shown to do in studies is to reduce methane in the gut. So being that I'm going to be incorporating that into my daily diet, I think that's a good thing to help combat the methane that's there. Again, I don't know that it's really a huge problem. It is technically positive, but I don't have those symptoms. Again, not as cut and dry as we would like it to be, but I feel like I'm doing the right thing in incorporating the Reuteri, and just doing that for a few months. It'll be interesting to do another test and see if there's any change there. So like I told you in my January intentions video, I was intending to do more of a carnivore type diet, not 100% crystal clear carnivore, but carnivore with some spices, with some flavored element, things like that. And I have done that for about 2 weeks now. And the main reason I was doing that was like for a reset, as well as preparing for this SIBO test, which I have finished now. And so, like I said, the first thing I added back was the yogurt. Very happy with that. And I am just going to be slowly adding things back over the next few days. I'm going to add back cheese in, moderate amounts. Always try to be moderate with cheese. So I'm going to be adding that back in here in the next few days. I'm going to give the yogurt a couple days, see how I do with that. Then maybe add in the cheese. Also, another thing that I'm going to add in, which is kind of funny, is acacia fiber. Not because I want acacia fiber itself, but because it's a common ingredient in some products that I want to incorporate back into my diet. And I've never felt like I had an issue with acacia fiber, so I just want to introduce it back in so that I can partake in some products that I like to use, like the Perfect Keto MCT oil powder, different things like that. So that's kind of the things that I'm thinking of adding in pretty quickly is the yogurt, the cheese, the acacia fiber, and that would include the products that contain it. As far as a quick update on how I have felt during this 2-week carnivore reset, I've actually felt pretty bad. And of course, it could be like detox, just cutting out all the fiber. I didn't have any terrible digestive issues. That's good. As far as digestion, like bloating, stuff like that, that's been all fine. No issues there. That totally makes sense with being carnivore. But everything else has been not great. Sleep was disrupted for a while, although I think that kind of balanced out after the first few days. But then I have had headaches. I have had like energy issues. Again, it's only been, 2 weeks, so it could be that I'm just detoxing and that I could get through that and be fine. And if I was planning on like staying carnivore long term, it'd be pretty easy to just push through this and think I'm just going to push through this and then, I'll come out on the other side. It'll be better. But because I'm not planning on being carnivore full time, I'm not really motivated to push it and to do it any longer. It's like, I'll just go back to the way I was eating. I was feeling great. My blood sugar was great. So anyways, I'm happy with what I've done for these past 2 weeks. But I'm really not looking to continue the carnivore. As far as my blood sugar, that has been really interesting because I've had my NutriSense glucose monitor on. And what I found is that initially when I first dropped off everything except meat, and I think I was eating more fat overall, but not a ton. And I didn't reduce my protein. I was still eating, between 120 and 140 grams of protein per day, and then almost no carbs, and then, fat making up the rest. I found initially that my blood sugar dropped. And at night, I was staying in the 70s all night, which is great. And then my average blood sugar for the day for the first probably 6 or 7 days of the carnivore challenge, my average blood sugar was in the low 80s, when typically it's been in the mid to higher 80s. And so I did see my average blood sugar go down. But the interesting thing is that it didn't stay that way. It's like my body had that reaction initially, and then it readjusted, and I was back up into the mid to high 80s as far as my average blood sugar for the day. So I found that kind of interesting, and I have found that to be the case for me when I've tried different techniques of lowering my blood sugar, like back when I did keto, like 80-20 keto. Initially, when I started, my blood sugar lowered, but then it's like my body adjusts somehow and, thinks that my blood sugar shouldn't be that low. And so it redoubles its efforts to keep my blood sugar higher. And at that point, I pushed it so far that I started, like, my blood sugar got really high, and I started reacting to everything. My blood sugar would just jump up to any tiny amount of anything, and it was really frustrating. So it was interesting to see how initially it went down, but then it adjusted and came back up, and it kind of confirmed some things to me about how I don't want to try to like artificially push my blood sugar low, because my body is very, very smart, and it will adjust. And oftentimes when the body feels like it has to adjust, it overcompensates. And I feel like if I pushed it too far, like I've done in the past, that my blood sugar would overcompensate and I would end up with higher blood sugars. That's just my hypothesis. This video is already long enough, so I hope you enjoyed that update. As always, I would like it to be more cut and dry, more black and white, but health isn't usually that way. So I am just going to leave it here. I hope you guys are doing great, and I will see you again in another video. So you finally decided to calm down, huh? Right when I'm all the way done? Now you're going to just be calm and sit here and watch the birds? Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
What you doing, Levi?
I'm still playing.
You're playing sand?
Yeah.
That's
Look
cool.
What I did.
What?
Look, this is his parking spot up on the tree.
Oh, he
There's
parks
that
under the tree. That's cool.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then this. But then he got sent. Now two. This guy was buried. Now the excavator buried.
Oh my goodness, how funny.
Now there's another. Now there's two more.
What? That's so awesome.